going to say it really quiet this time. So, can y'all hear me? Should I talk a little louder? How about here? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, there are enough people in here old enough to remember that. Can you hear me now? He says he can hear me. Let's find somebody with a little bit older ears. Anybody else back there who has older ears? Okay, good. There we go. And there's Amy. It's so fun. Yeah. This is how we know that we're starting to grow community and I'm going to cry. I'm not going to. I hear people chit-chatting and like, were you here last time? Yeah, I was here 2 times ago. We're starting to have that. If you don't know, the Storytellers Porch is not about stories. It just looks like it's about stories. It's actually about magic and community. And stories are just the vehicle for that magic of community. So I am so glad you're here. I do not have words. I always make notes. I spend the whole week ahead of time writing out notes so I make sure and say all the right things to you all. And then I forget that I brought them and I just want to talk to you because I just think that's a little bit more fun. This week, as I was getting ready for the event, I spoke with a lady who has been to the Storytellers several times. And as we were talking, she said, I work from home. COVID kind of got me stuck at home 5 years ago, and I work from home. And sometimes going out just is too much. And I've been there. I don't know anybody else who works from home, and we get focused at home, and we do the thing, and we work. And COVID made it so easy for us all to stay at home. And she said, but I always want to come to the Storytellers Porch, the Porch Live. This is the Porch Live, just in case you're wondering. It's also been called the front porch, the back porch, the side porch, the live porch. I have not had the wraparound portion yet, but we might do that next time. But it is the Porch Live, hosted by the Storytellers Porch. But she said the Porch Live is always a place I can go for a little bit of time. I feel safe, I feel magical, and it's wonderful. So I like to start our evening with a little bit of magic. And I see a little person. I love little people because they still believe in magic. I do too.
Yeah.
If you don't, just come to me. I'll rub a little bit off on you. I believe so deeply in magic. And so I don't know if you're like I am, or I just haven't really been listening to the news too much this week. I probably should listen a little bit more. I have my little systems, morning, night. That's all I do. But for just the next 2 hours, we're going to start, and I'm just going to draw a bubble right over the Treehouse Cafe of magic, where we get to go away to different places, different countries, different experiences, maybe even a little bit of imagination. And we're going to be in this bubble for a little while. And I just really encourage you to just, however you connect with your soul, if you believe in soul or if you just believe in your body, whatever it is you believe in, connect in there and touch the magic that we're going to experience tonight. And our very first storyteller, which I know she's here, is Monica. Some of you may remember, I think it was last September or August, when I was still trying to do open mic. That doesn't work. So don't ever think you're going to come to the Storytellers Porch and tell an open mic, because it just isn't going to happen here. I couldn't figure out how to make it work. But she was one of the few people who did stand up and do open mic. And then she wanted to come back and do the full story. And one of the things that sets us a little differently than what you might expect in different worlds is I spend a lot of times, I'm a professional story coach, and I get to spend a lot of time with each of my storytellers. And so they are coming up here to share who they are and a little bit about them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Monica. She is in the process of writing a book, which we can't wait to get it to come out. When it does, I will post it all over the place, send out newsletters. And just a delightful all-around person. I'm not going to tell her story because it's her story. I do want to remind you, please don't record the stories. They will be posted later on YouTube with the storyteller's permission. But for now, this is their story. They own it. Please take all the pictures you want and hashtag Storytellers Porch. That's great, although I don't think we have room for too many more. But we want to always include everybody. So please do that. And Monica, I'm just so delighted you're here. Come on up.
All right. As I stepped out of the shower, the air was thick with heat. I stepped over to the mirror and wiped the steam away. I froze. I didn't recognize the reflection staring back at me in the glass. My face was swollen, my skin was ashen, and the once dazzling smile was now a miserable frown. I leaned in closer. "Monica, what happened to you?" No, it wasn't COVID-19 symptoms ravaging my body. Instead, it was the weight of thousands of dollars in student loan debt that I had from a for-profit college's nursing program a decade before. I stood there a little longer, and I decided that day, I didn't know how, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I had to overcome this depression that I was feeling, and I had to press on. I grew up the baby of 8 in a small town in Kentucky. And I won't lie, I always danced to the beat of my own drum. I had wanted to be a nurse since I was 6 years old. And at 27 years old, I graduated from nursing school. I worked for a year in my hometown, then decided I wanted to move 4 hours away to Lexington. I just thought it was time I go bigger. For a while, things were great in Lexington. And in a few years, I had experienced 6 losses. 6 people close to me passed away. And in the midst of nursing that grieving heart, the landscape of nursing was changing in Lexington, meaning the nursing license that I held at the time was no longer sufficient for me to work at certain hospitals there. The issue that I met with was there were long waiting lists for the nursing programs, but my faith and my belief told me that things would work together for my good, and they did. A couple of days later, I checked my mailbox and there was a nursing magazine from the Kentucky Board of Nursing that said, "Nursing program, no waiting list." I enrolled. I knew with that degree, it would be okay to take out student loans because I'd have no problem paying it back. Yes, I was nursing a grieving heart, and my income had changed, but I was determined to press on. The nursing program consisted of 4 quarters, and the first 2 quarters were great. In the 3rd quarter, I noticed something seemed off. A couple days later, some of my classmates sent emails to our director of nursing. That director of nursing came into our class and sat down, and he said, "I got your emails, and here's what I think of them." And very dramatically, he began to tear them up and threw them in the air like confetti and said to us, "If the instructor tells you to stand in the corner on your head and whistle Dixie, you are to stand in the corner on your head and whistle Dixie." I was floored. You guys, I just knew any moment now, Ashton Kutcher was going to come out and tell us we were being punked. A few moments later, I realized he was serious. A day later, he came back in and said to us, "This quarter has been bad. If you all take an exam of 200 questions and pass it, you will be passed to the 4th and final quarter." And I just knew, yes, I had no problem passing this exam. And I did pass it. However, I had addressed an unethical situation with him earlier in that quarter. And he told me, if you had an issue with it, file an appeal. By the way, students never win them, but I won. Later on, he failed me. I knew the writing was on the wall, so I withdrew. I also knew this was really wrong, and I needed to do something. I worked for months trying to get attention brought to this situation. Some of the big things that ended up happening was I ended up testifying in our state's capital in Frankfort, Kentucky, in front of lawmakers. And from that, a bill was passed that I worked alongside the lawmakers to get passed. And also there was a board that oversaw the schools that was disbanded and a new board was created. And I was appointed to that board for 4 years by our then governor. Yes, the bill was signed, the ink had dried, the lights were all gone from all of the news attention. I still sat with all of that debt. I was able to help others, but I was still at that time unable to help myself. For that reason, I fell into a deep depression. And for a long while, I was no longer sure how to press on. The pandemic hit and the world stopped. And it was in that silence that drum that I used to dance to the beat of started to beat again. And I knew it was time for me to figure out a way. So I started to do the deep work of overcoming this. I shared my thoughts with a longtime friend who had been telling me for years, Monica, you've got to write a book about this experience. But I had no idea. I didn't know any authors. What? Yet, I decided to take this idea and pitch it to 6 literary agents. And today, I am represented by one of them out of New York. My story will no longer take me to the bottom. I hope it takes me to more and more stages. I'm determined now, again, to press on. I wallowed in that rabbit hole of depression for a decade. Depression for me meant defeat, disappointment, loss, grief, failure. But a few years ago, maybe about 3, I looked at that word depression once more, and it was as though it was a little bit of a miracle. Because what I found in the word depression, there are also the letters to spell I pressed on. Depression was heavy. It weighed me back. It weighed me down. I reached rock bottom. It had me buried for a decade. I had no idea for a long time how to press on. But once I did, things started to change. Thank you.
I have the best neighbor in the world who calls me and texts me when I leave the garage door open. Thank you, Bev. I left the garage door open today. They take really good care of me. But Aryn lives just a few houses down to me, and I had never met Aryn. And she came to a couple porches because of seeing the ad in Facebook. Her story is one that I had never heard before. I know the details. I'm not going to give any of it away because it's a pretty cool story. But it's just a reminder of our humanness and how when we connect with other people, what we've been through can shift their lives. So Aryn Lockhart, come on up.
Thanks so much for coming. I'm super excited to share my story. So let me go ahead and get started. So when I was a child, my own mother had told me that if I hadn't been adopted, I'd probably be banging a can in the rice fields. she also said that I was probably a product of a prostitute. My other people have told me that I should be so lucky because the American soldiers saved my life. And then I've also been told, because I came from Vietnam, that when I see a Vietnam veteran, I should walk up to them and tell them, thank you for my life. Now, these are things that people have said to me throughout at different times in my life, and it's a heavy, heavy burden for someone who's just trying to live their life under circumstances that they had no power or no control over. But people have a tendency, particularly with adoptees, to be very outward and forward, and those are some of the things that I was told throughout my life. So let me back up a little bit. Back in 1975, Gerald Ford had sanctioned this humanitarian mission to get the kids out. The concern is that the Viet Cong, particularly if these children were mixed race, they would not be kind to these children, and that potentially their lives were in danger. And so that was the whole thought process, was to get them out of the country. So the inaugural flight was a military mission. It was a gigantic C-5A. If anybody has familiarity with military planes, it's basically a gigantic cargo plane. And what it does is there's a whole bottom open section cargo area, and you can put vehicles in it, you can put artillery in it, and then on the top is like a troop compartment. So about 300 folks showed up on the tarmac in Tanzania Air Base, and then they started filling up this aircraft. So the older children were kind of on the bottom. There's like these like areas where it's like a catwalk kind of a thing. So some of the children sat along there. They're all in the actual cargo area. And then up in the troop compartment is where they put the youngest children. So they literally carried some of these children. It's like a ladder that goes straight up. And they had to like send each child up, the youngest ones, up into that top portion. And then they put 3 babies to a seat. And that was how they filled the plane. So it was mass chaos. There were escorts that had arrived, as well as having all of these about 300 children on board. So the plane took off, and then about 15 minutes into it, there was what's called a rapid decompression. So in one of these planes, they have this big cargo door, and then that comes up, and then there's these doors that go around it. Those doors blew off, and then they had to turn around and try to make it back to Tanzania. So these Air Force pilots were just young captains, probably in their early 30s at the latest. And they came back and they were headed towards Tanzania. Unfortunately, they didn't make it. And then they hit the rice field, bounced back up, and then came back down and crashed into the rice paddy. So the plane broke into its major components. So you had the troop compartment that I explained, they kind of went into one section, the cockpit went into another, but that cargo area was hollow. And as a result of that, it ended up compressing and basically obliterating, and most of the fatalities occurred there. So there were about 178 fatalities of about 300 folks that were on that plane. So my parents always believed that I was on that plane. And so that was the story that my whole life, so that was the foundation of my life and my story. And it created a lot of pressure and a lot of intensity to live a life that was extraordinary. So from there, I went ahead and, I went to college. I had all these wonderful, great opportunities. And then after college, I was like, you know what? I want to write about Operation Baby Lift. And so I started doing some research. And this was way back in 1997 when the internet was just in its infancy. So I put in Operation Baby Lift into the search engine at the time, and then an article popped up about Regina Auni, and it was called The Lady is a Tiger. And she was the medical crew director on that flight. And I thought, this might be my first opportunity to learn a little bit about my own history. So I went through the author, come to find out she was in South Carolina, and I was in the DC area at the time. So after a few misses, we finally were able to connect. We had an amazing conversation, and she was coming back up into the DC area. So we met for the first time, and it was life-changing. She was able to tell me more about Operation Baby Lift, what it was like that day. She had memorabilia, she had articles, and this was the first time I was able to start putting pieces of my history together. It was a really beautiful experience. So we forged a very close relationship over the next 25 years. She and I ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is kind of ironic and serendipitous because of all the places. We were both sort of East Coast, ended up in New Mexico, and our relationship became closer and closer. She was stationed there and I was stationed there too. So after about 15 years, we decided we should write a book. And so we set out to do that. Our goal was the 40th anniversary of Operation Baby Lift. And the goal in the storytelling was her story of Operation Baby Lift, my story of Operation Baby Lift, and then how our lives forged together and how we continued on. And that was the whole premise of the book. And we wrote that book about 10 years ago. And it was amazing. And I'm so glad that we had that opportunity. Part of the book, and one of the most important aspects of it, was we felt like we really needed to go back to Vietnam. So here we were both pilgriming back to Vietnam. Me for the first time since I was a baby. This was a completely foreign experience to me. She hadn't been back since the accident. And so that was, we had that experience together. When I went back, it was intense to be in a country that is your own, but you do not belong to it. And what I understood in that moment was that two things could live in the same place. I could be proudly American, and I could also be very proudly Vietnamese. So that was my experience leaving and after my first visit for the 40th anniversary. So after that, a couple of years later, I decided that I wanted to pay it forward. And so I decided at 44 to adopt 3 children out of foster care. So I wanted to give my children the opportunity that I have been given of just education and, just beautiful experiences. But their adoption experience is very, very different than mine. They came from foster care. I came from this international adoption experience. What's very interesting, and it's not uncommon, is that for me, I am Vietnamese. My parents are white. My children are white. So for me, I think I identify, and it was just the way that it worked out. But I have 3 beautiful children, and I made sure that they understood that they should never, ever have to feel thankful to me for me being their mother. So I remind them all the time, you should be thankful for all the things in life, but you don't have to be thankful for what I did for you, because that wasn't of your choice. So much so that my middle child always says, whenever I'm getting frustrated, I'm like, this is so much to be a single mom with these 3 children. She goes, well, you chose it. And she's not wrong. I did. I chose it. So I've had this beautiful experience. I've had them now for almost 7 years. We adopted in the middle of COVID in 2020. And I wouldn't change anything in the world, but it's not an easy ride by any stretch of the imagination. So Regina and I continue to tell stories. So I am very familiar with telling my story. I've done this in lots of different venues. I've not done it this quite impromptu, which is kind of fun. I wanted to stretch myself and tell the story, but kind of add some new elements. And I've done lots of speaking engagements together. And what I found is that I loved telling my story. I wrote the book, and I thought that was going to be the pinnacle, but actually telling the story and having the interactions with people and meeting Vietnam vets and seeing for them that for my role and my ability to tell the story was very full circle for them. I think a lot of them struggled with understanding their role in the war. And when they saw me as an accomplished adult who was very appreciative of everything that I had, I think it helped them heal as much as it was helping me heal. So that was kind of a really cool byproduct from the experience. So just like the Porch Live, I realized how valuable stories were. And so when I learned about this opportunity and I learned about the Porch Live, I was like, I want to tell my story, because I think sharing in our stories and doing something just like this event, it's beautiful. And it's just one of my favorite things. So 40th anniversary passed, and that was a whole 10 years ago, which is hard to believe. And Regina actually passed away 2 years ago. And it has been a heavy, heavy weight. But I'm so glad that we wrote the book together. She's forever a piece and part of me. And then last year was our 50th anniversary. So lots of adoptees like myself, we all pilgrimed back to Vietnam. And it was a completely different experience the second time around. I went in large part to honor Regina. I wanted to honor all of whom were a part of my story and how I was able to come here. The interesting thing about this particular trip is that I decided I was going to do birth family search. And before this, I kind of built in the narrative and belief that I didn't need it. I had my adoptive parents. It wasn't something that was necessary. But at 51, I was like, hey, time is running out. And other adoptees were finding birth parents. And I thought, if I'm going to throw a dart at the board, let's do it now. So I went back with that intention. I took part in some of the ceremonies, but also my goal was to just start a birth family search. So I started it, and I had an interpreter with me. We went to lots of different places, but basically it was like a needle in a haystack. I was going to have to like canvass people on the street because my paperwork is not accurate in any way, shape, or form. And that is war. So I actually traveled on a paperwork of 2 children before me. The nun who chose me for my parents actually died on the C5 crash. So all of my ancestors died with her. And so I don't even know my actual birth date. So I traveled on this other person's paperwork. And ultimately, it was a matter of just being able to talk to people on the street. Maybe somebody knew something. Where my orphanage is no longer. They tore it down because of their work with the Americans, and now it's a government building. But we started talking to folks on the street, and what happened, was completely unexpected for me. I would talk with these strangers through my interpreter and tell them my story, and they looked and they would be like, talk a little bit like, yeah, we remember when the nuns were here, and but they didn't have a lot of information. And in a couple instances, the look on their face was something I wasn't expecting. It was straight pity. They looked at me with sadness of, wait, hold on, you're looking for family, you've left the country, you don't know any of your family, you don't know any of your information. And I was like, no, I don't know anything. And for the first time in my life, I never imagined that I would be meeting strangers on the street who would see something in my story that I didn't even see. And what it was is my whole entire life, people had told me I had to be thankful. And this was the first opportunity where I was able to see and to feel like it was okay for me to acknowledge the fact that I lost something too. I lost my history. I lost family. I don't even know my actual birth date. And so again, in that belief of like 2 things can live in the same space, I could be very appreciative of the life I have and also recognize that I had a whole lot of loss. So a couple of years ago, or like not too long ago, I came across this story and it was about kintsugi. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of taking broken pieces and putting it back together with gold. And the whole idea of it is that it's stronger and it's more beautiful afterwards. And I will say right now, life is hard. My family and I, we're having this is an intense season for us. And I would say that we are broken pieces. But I also know that we're going to come together and we're going to be mended and we're going to have just this beautiful space. And in that place, 2 things will still be true. We're going to be broken and beautiful. Thanks, everybody.
I just so appreciate Aryn's story. The fact when she was telling me the story, we were working on it. I was in 8th grade when that happened. And it meant something, but it didn't have that personal face. And when we experience history through a personal face, it changes the way we see it. And so I do want to let you know, this is Aryn's book. And she has a few copies of it tonight, just ones that she happened to have, but you can get it other places. So I just want to let you know, it's a wonderful story about that time where many of us have forgotten if we were not part of that war. And Colorado Springs is a little different. I went to Air Academy School District 20, back when it was very small, and almost everybody was military. I was one of like 20 kids in my high school class who are not military. But now it's not like that. So if you don't know the story, listen to it. And the kintsugi life that Aryn talks about is really how we do everything in life. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And with that, take a 10-minute hiatus and we'll see you back in 10. Sweetie. And then everybody would show up. It was so simple. Oh. So I think the mic's working. I was just testing the mic. And you're off quieting down. I think we're good.
So it was 2001, and I was on bed rest. I don't know if any of you remember 2001, but you did not have your cell phone in your hand with the internet. You did not have a DVR. You had nothing to entertain you if you were on bed rest, except for maybe the company of somebody that you had just met and somebody who was kind and would bring you dinner to feed your family because you couldn't get up to even go to the bathroom really when you were on bed rest, or to bring you stories to get you through those 7 weeks. And I hope that someday you all get to meet somebody who is like that, who your life gets to connect for the next 26 years or 55 years or however long it is. I didn't know you were going to cry. I thought I would cry. Jill Davis was that for me. We met a lifetime ago, both of ours. And sometimes you just get to be in the right place at the right time. I wasn't supposed to be here, but yet here we are again together. And I'm so thrilled to introduce all of you, one of the best storytellers and a dear friend. So everyone, it's Jill Davis.
One more story. Just one more story, Mom, please, one more story. I had such a hard and fast rule with my kids. 2 stories, 10 minutes, lights out. I needed my rest. I didn't care if they rested. But 2 stories were how we started almost every night. When they were little, I would let them pick the stories. And then as they got older, it became chapter books. And chapter books, because I have 2 big kids and 2 little kids, same dad, just lots of room in between. And the littles read along with us. They would all gather around and we would sit and we would read those stories. And those stories became our lifeline. I knew that for that 20, 30 minutes every evening, I could take a breath. The goal was to not fall asleep. I usually didn't. Those were really good days. It was fun having little ones. Even when I had big ones and little ones, it was still fun. And those stories carried us. I have 4 kids. I used to tell stories about them all the time before I knew the rule about don't tell a story about somebody without their permission. Now I know, and I've asked permission. And I don't use names anymore because they have real lives in the big world. But one of those children many years ago had a crisis in their life. And they called me on the phone from a different state, and they're like, Mom, I'm in trouble. I need help. Well, I'm in Colorado. They're in a different state. I can't help. But I thought I can get help to them. This was in the time of the internet and the cell phones. And I started making phone calls and doing the internet, trying to find a place for them to have somebody come get them to a safe place. But in between that time, that person was really having a struggle. And I thought, what's the one thing I can do to keep them connected to this ground and this earth while we're waiting for safety? So I went through my house. I grabbed every child's book I could find, including Cricket Magazine, which is the best collection of stories you've ever seen. And I read to that child for 3.5 hours because that is the power of story. I hope that for you, you had someone in your life who told you stories, who read you books, who put you to bed. But I know the world isn't like that. I grew up in a pretty chaotic home, and occasionally my mom would remember I was there and she'd read me a book. And those were special times. There were a lot of kids in my house. But I hope if you didn't have that parent who did that, you have someone now who will do that for you. Or perhaps you had that teacher. For me, it was a kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Ertl in kindergarten at Woodman Valley Elementary. And it was a 3-hour kindergarten, but it felt like an eternity. I started kindergarten when I was 4. And it was so long, but I knew at the end of every day, my 3 hours, we would have milk and cookies, truthfully, milk and cookies, even though I'm allergic to dairy. But we had milk and cookies, and then we put our heads on the desk. We didn't look at each other. And I wasn't allowed to look at my next door neighbor, Chris Carlson, because we would giggle, and then we would get in trouble. But I remember Mrs. Ertl reading those stories to us, telling us different things, and just the calm that came from that. And there's research that shows that the voice that you heard tell you stories and talk to you as a child is the place that you feel the safest. So for those of you who didn't get that, I'm going to be your storyteller tonight. And because we're low tech around here and I couldn't figure out how to do a projector fast enough, we're going to read a book. And some of you have in front of you a little package, and you're going to be the designated page turner for your area because we're a community. If you're up here, you should be able to see the pictures. If not, you're going to want to see them. Some of you may have heard of the big orange Splot. Has anybody? I know Catherine has. I heard of that little guy back there. He's my grandson. He's heard of it. Have you? Honestly, show of hands. Liam and Catherine and me. Anybody else? Mark? Okay, well, this is going to be fun then. Here we go. The Big Orange Splot by Daniel Manus, Pinkwater. I read this for the first time when my oldest was 2 years old. And it's been read so many times since. And I grabbed my original copy and I couldn't turn the pages anymore. So here we go with the new copy. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. And if you can't see the pictures, hold it up for other people there. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean Street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, oh, this is the best from my vantage point, seeing everybody read the big orange spot. Oh my gosh. Oh, anyway, okay, he liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean Street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. Nobody knows why. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. Nobody knows why. And he dropped that can of paint right on Mr. Plumbean's house. And nobody knows why. It made a big orange spot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Ooh, too bad, everybody said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean, but he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at it, at the big orange spot, for a long time. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange spot. And someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange spot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. The houses were not all the same. But Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. There was a big orange spot, and there were little orange spots, and there were stripes, and there were pictures of elephants and lions and steam shovels. The people said, Mr. Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools, and that night he built a tower on the top of his roof, and he painted a clock on that tower. Cool. The next day, the people said, Plumbean has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and, oh, I did this better when I was younger, and slipped his howser. They decided that they would pretend not to notice. It's great to pretend, isn't it? Because we pretend that things that are right in front of us are not real. That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between the two palm trees. There was an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. And as an adult, I'm pretty sure there must have been some vodka in there. Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me, and I am it. My house is My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, said Mr. Plumbean. The people went away, and my kids would say, Mama, don't cry. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go and have a talk with him. Tell him that we all liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours, as we have a neat street. The man went to Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talked all night long. And the next morning, when the neighbors came out of the house, Oh, I missed it, but okay. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of the houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. "What have you done to your house?" they shouted at the man. "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams," said the man who had always loved ships. "He's just like Plumbean," the people said. "He's got bees in his bonnets, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle." Then one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm tree and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day, that person was set about changing his own house to fit his dreams. And we have a hot air balloon and a Taj Mahal and a medieval castle. I think they played Dungeons and Dragons, and a Greek column. Whenever a stranger comes to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the strangers would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be and it looks like all our dreams." Yep. Yes. Great book. I have one other child. Well, I have 3 other children other than the first story. But when we were talking about this book and how much we love this book, I keep the copies that you have are a stack that I keep at home that I mail to different people when I know they're going through things. And this particular child said this book that they listened to all those years was when they got bullied in school in 5th grade was brutal. They got bullied, or when they felt like they weren't doing the right thing and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, they would remember, "It looks like all my dreams." Thank you.
Yeah.
A year ago, when we were building this porch and getting things organized, there was somebody else in another country, in another part of the world, who was doing something very different. And I'm very, very honored. He reached out to me last summer. It took us a while to make it work. But Jeff Meade and his family are here. I just want to introduce the family because you guys are like kind of cool. I would want to be your friend because you're cool. And I'm just so delighted. I'm not going to say anything else because, again, this is his story. I'd like to bring Jeff Meade up from you're way up there in northern Colorado.
Fort Collins, yeah.
Yeah, Fort Collins.
All right, everybody, can you hear me? Is the mic on? All right. The line of Africans behind me is growing restless, frustrated, muttering, "Mzungu," I can hear him say. Mzungu means white guy. And depending on the context, it can be derogatory. When they're frustrated that I've got so much stuff to cram back in my pockets. How did I not realize that the first stop at the Interpol office in Kampala, Uganda, would be a metal detector? And clearly I'm not moving fast enough because everyone's grumbling. Well, now that I'm finally through, I get a chance to look around and see where I'm at. I've never been to an Interpol office before. It's a large open-air walled compound. It's about half the size of a football field, gently sloping hill, and at the top of the hill is a large canvas tent. And there's about 100 of those flimsy, white, wobbly plastic patio chairs, and just about every single one of them is occupied. Just in front of the tent is a cinder block building with a large open-air porch, and that's full of people as well. At the bottom of the hill is a cinder block building with no windows and a large metal door swung open, and there's soldiers all over the place, which should be expected because Uganda is a military state. There's only one Mzungu in the whole place. I'm not supposed to be here. I've spent the last 9 years traveling across Africa as an international school, middle school English teacher, social studies teacher, following behind my wife, who was living out her dream to be an American diplomat with the United States Agency for International Development. But we woke up last Wednesday with an email from the State Department that said that USAID had been considered a criminal organization and it was done, closed. That email said we had 72 hours to leave the country. That email did not tell us where we were supposed to go. That email said, sell your car if you can. That email said, leave your pets behind. That email did not say good luck to you. So I walked right into my principal's office that morning and said, I think today's my last day. And he said, no, it's not. I was the only diplomat teacher on his staff, and we spent the last several days trying to figure out how to keep me in country should USAID collapse, right? If we're actually being sent home. School maintains a condo across the street from campus for emergency situations. He's got the school maintenance team queued up to go and get our family household belongings and move them into a storage unit in the back of the school theater, right? And in order for me to stay, I have to get my diplomat visa transferred to a local visa. So I'm at the Interpol office, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm standing there holding my papers, looking around, and I make eye contact with one of the younger soldiers. And he flips his chin towards the little building at the bottom of the hill. And so I guess I'll start there. But that little bit of help today is going to be most appreciated. So I mouthed, thank you. And he nodded in acknowledgement. Well, I go walking over to this small building, and there's no windows, so it's dark inside. Big metal door is letting in the only light. It's a small building. It's only about 12 feet square. And on the inside is a very large desk. And along one wall is a 3-person wooden bench that's currently unoccupied. And in front of that big desk is a small plastic wobbly patio chair, currently occupied by a petite, soft-spoken African woman who was handing her visa documents to one of the largest men I've ever seen. This man's military uniform speaks of power and authority. He's got the medals and the badges and the epaulets, the whole thing. And he looks up and sees a Mzungu standing in the doorway looking real nervous, and he seems okay with giving me a little bit of space. Well, the lady gets done and exits the building, and I walk in with my packet to sit in that wobbly plastic chair when another guy comes and jumps in and sits and plops himself down. And this line jumper pulls out his documents and starts to hand them to the general. And the general tears into him. And these two men go back and forth heatedly in what I assume is Swahili. Swahili is a shared language of East Africa that helps to unite all of these different individual countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya. They all speak Swahili and I don't, which is another reason I feel like I'm outside this group, right? And at one point, line jumper looks over and points at me while he's saying something, and I can tell he's not happy that he has to wait for some Mzungu in order to get his turn, right? Well, line jumper angrily stands up and gets out of the way, and I sit down and feeling really intimidated, hand my documents to the general, who takes a quick look, everything's in order, and he stamps it and sends me on my way. Surprisingly easy. But in order to get out of the building, I have to walk past line jumper, and I almost catch fire from the burning anger coming out of his eyes. Well, I walk back outside, and I see that same young soldier, and he waves me up, all right? He's still willing to help me out. So I go up, and I look at him, and he takes a look at my papers, everything's in order, and he thumbs me up to that big canvas tent. And I proceed to spend the next 2 hours in one of those plastic flimsy chairs trying to do two things. One, stay comfortable, and two, not have it spill me out into Uganda's red dirt, right? And every about 20 minutes, a different soldier comes in and barks out a whole bunch of names, and about 20 people would get up and follow him to that covered patio. Well, it's been about 2 hours, and I'm distracting myself playing games on my phone, and I hear a new sound that doesn't sound like the other ones. And he says, and I look over at him, and he's looking right at me, going, you know what? I've been in Africa for a long time, 9 years now, and I have yet to meet an African that can properly pronounce Jeff Meade. right? So I get out of my chair going, whoo, I almost missed that one. And I get a chance to walk over. He takes me over to the covered patio, and my heart sinks. It is full of people. There's about 15 wooden backless benches, 20 feet long, that are just shoulder to shoulder with people. And a different soldier's coming in, and he's taking the first 5 or 6 at a time. And the entire crowd stands up and shuffles over a couple seats and sits back down. And I'm directed to the bench at the back where all the new people go. And I realize I'm going to be here all day. All day. Well, I sit down, and what better place to hide than in a book? I only get a sentence or two in when someone sits down heavily next to me. Sure enough, it's The Line Jumper. Yeah. Well, I go back to reading my book, pretending no one can see me. And he leans over and he says, well, what book are you reading? Which actually catches me off guard. Because one of the things that I've learned living in Africa for 9 years is that just about everybody speaks some level of English, right? But it's entirely dependent on how much formal schooling you've had. So this man is educated, and that's really going to give him a leg up in the world as he moves to a new country and tries to figure out how to get himself a job. Well, I said, well, I'm reading The Outsiders with my students this week. And he says, oh, you're a teacher? What are you doing here? I thought Interpol was just for people who need visas. And I said, well, I have a problem with my visa. I didn't feel like going into detail about the closure of USAID. And I figured he probably didn't know what that meant. So, you know, in the course of the last 9 months being home, I've also come to realize that a lot of Americans didn't know what USAID was either. So I didn't feel like explaining it to him. Well, he says, well, what is your book about? And I said, well, The Outsiders is about a group of teenagers that are on the outside of society, largely because people make assumptions about them based on what they look like, their economic status, and their family background. And he says, oh, I feel like an outsider too, and gives me a little elbow and a wink. You know what? I'm kind of starting to like this guy. And I said, well, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm from Kenya, and there's no work in Kenya. And I said, well, are you staying with family? And he says, I am. I've come to realize that a lot of what would happen is that one person would move to a different country, get a house and get a job set up. And then there's this rotating pattern of family members that come and stay for several months at a time looking for their own jobs as well. Well, Line Jumper says, you know, I don't want to stay with my sister very long. She has enough mouths to feed, which is not what I'm used to. And I've got a lot of respect for that. And it made me think about Ponyboy, the lead main character in The Outsiders, because Ponyboy is educated. He has an opportunity that the other greasers in the gang don't have. He has an opportunity to get out, right? And all of the rest of the greaser gang knows that Ponyboy has some opportunities that they don't, and they encourage him like family. And the challenge is that when you go out and do something new and do something by yourself and something different, you're often alone, and that can be our first barrier to actually making things happen. Well, over the course of the next 20 minutes, Line Jumper and I had a really nice conversation, and it didn't take quite as long as I thought. I ended up getting my pictures done, my fingerprints taken. The school taxi was right on time, got me back to school only 3 minutes late. And we lucked out because over the course of the next week, USAID had been put on an extension to close, so we got another week. And then we got one more week after that. And then they decided we could actually stay until the end of the school year. So a lot of this panic mode, that was allowed to kind of subside. But part of my challenge and my family's challenge was to decide, do we actually stay abroad? Do we shed the diplomatic perks and honestly that American identity and become just another international teacher family? My wife lost her job, lost all of her friends. right? It would have been a lonely experience. Or did we admit our participation in this criminal gang and move home back to the United States? And that's what we decided to do. And it's been a bumpy ride. It's been 9 months. We're still trying to figure out where to live. We're still trying to figure out where to go to school and how to pick ourselves up, moving home to a country that we're from, but feels really different than the one we're used to. And I have thought about Line Jumper over the course of the last 9 months, many, many times. And every time I think about him, I wonder where he's at. And I wonder if he actually made it, if he got himself a job and he got himself to get picked up and was able to actually start something new. And every time I think about him, I think of my favorite scene in The Outsiders when Ponyboy is trying to console his close friend, Johnny, who's dying in the hospital. And Johnny tells Ponyboy to stay gold. And what stay gold means is that you have to stay true to yourself. You have to have that courage to go out and find your destiny and do the thing you have the opportunity to do. So I think if I had a chance to say anything to Line Jumper today, it would be to stay gold, Line Jumper, stay gold.
I kind of don't know what else to say, right? So I'm going to try to say a few things. Press on. The Kintsugi life makes us stronger and more beautiful when there's brokenness. This is my dream. This is my home. Be in your home, be in your dream, and stay gold. Tonight, be sure and think. I just am watching Sarah. Some people ask me if I own this place. I do not. Sarah does, and she's amazing. So be sure and thank her. Be sure and think. And Willow. And I want to thank my team who are here, which Drew, thank you for making everything wonderful. Robert for helping us with the backdrop. Mark with sound. Liam, who makes me smile. Catherine, who hosts the table. And John and Sue, who I can't function without. So thank you all. Martha, I'm coming after you on those tears later on. Love you. Stay gold. Come back in 2 months. Always come early, apparently. And thank you for sharing your night with us. We have, the drawing. Dang it. See, I do those things. Sue, do you have the bag? The drawing is for the present I told you couldn't have. I didn't know how bad that would sound when I planned it out this morning. I'm like, that didn't work. So we're going to just mix these up, and I'm going to call out 10 names, and there should be 10 books. Laura Amundsen. So if there's a book on your table, go ahead and take it. If there's not, we'll make sure we find them for you. Oh, there's a lot. You guys were very obedient. Keith Green. That'll be a good book for you, Keith. It works well with adolescents, too. James Barrett. Yay! And I don't know James yet, but it's a good name. That was my dad's name, was James. Nalanya Janka? Nalanya. Is that right? Did I say it right? Thank you. One is for you. Oh, how many have we done? We've done 4? Oh, we'll go faster. Maybe. Berkeley. Berkeley, yay! Berkeley is Jeff's daughter. Nice. One of the cool kids. Joe Forg, who is, enough said. If you have not met Joe, I'm going to just inundate you. Joe is one of my favorite people. Wisdom ekes out of him. Cheryl Reinhardt. Yay. Amber Arnett. Six, 8. Okay, 2 more. Michelle. It just says Michelle. Okay. I'm like, I know a lot of Michelle's. I'm not sure where a book is. Are there any books left? I know there's more books out there. And then our final one is Patsy, another person full of wisdom. Take your time to meet people, talk to people. We get to hang out a little bit longer if you want to. Venue closes at 8, but it's summer, right? I know it's only March, but it feels like summer. And we have a porch, so hang out on the porch if you have conversations you want to continue. We'll see you all back here on the porch next May.